So we'll get started on tonight's session. And this is a supergroup session with one of our special guests. And I was really excited when Stephen Redfern agreed to come along tonight. We do these sessions sort of Perth time mostly, and it's 10 p.m. in Sydney. So thank you for staying up.
That's okay. You're welcome. Lucky I don't mind the night shifts, so not too bad at all.
Yeah. So Stephen and I have known each other for a while, and tell me if I'm wrong, Stephen, but I think I first made contact with you when you wrote to me at Aura about running an FKT. Would that be right? Can you remember that?
I think so. Yes, it was.
Yeah,
That was a long time ago. Definitely, yes.
it's a long time ago.
And I think that was my first idea of what Aura was all about, and that was my approach as to your views on running an FKT way back then.
Yeah, that's right. And I'd never come across Stephen, and at Aura you do get a number of communications from runners and runners with big grand ideas, and some of those go ahead and achieve those ideas, but most of them you sort of never hear from again. But Stephen has certainly been one of those guys who has achieved magnificently and has just become an amazing runner. And like I know a lot of Stephen's background, but I went through DUV today, and yeah, it's the sort of resume that any ultra runner would be absolutely proud of. So he's run the 300-kilometre Hong Kong 4 Trails Ultra, and he finished second there, and that's just a brutal race. He's a 24-hour runner. I think your best is 245, Steve?
That's correct, yeah. 245.
Yeah. And he's represented Australia at the World 24-Hour Championships in France. And we did the Asian Championships together when I was managing the team, which was terrific.
Taiwan, that was my very first time representing Australia.
Yeah.
Really great memories for that one. I think that's one that I will never forget. My first time doing that with such a beautiful team.
And Stephen's one of these runners who runs on all surfaces, and I think the last of these sessions we've done was with Nikki Wind, and she's the same. She runs road, she runs track, she runs trail, and Stephen's exactly the same. So he's run UTMB in 31 hours. He ran Westmax Monster, which is an absolute monster, and finished second to Shane Johnson. He ran Western States in 20 hours, and the
just with the Western States, that was actually done 3 weeks after I did my 245k 24-hour race here in Sydney.
Right, fantastic. And then Great Southern Endurance Run in 34 hours, which was amazing. He's not totally new to WA. He won the 100-miler at WTF in 2018 and set a really blazingly fast time that stood as the race record, even though the course has changed numerous times. But it was only broken by Michael Hooker by 15 minutes a couple of months ago. And he's also run the 24-hour down at Track Ultra in Bunbury.
I still actually hold that WTF miler. I still hold that up there as my best miler and my most memorable one I've ever run. The one over there.
Yeah. No, I remember you running that quickly. Dave Kennedy was having trouble keeping up, setting up aid stations for you.
Yep, I remember that one. He moves an aid station for the return, which he's never set up before 6 p.m. And I remember it was supposed to be there when I turned up. There was nothing there. So I kept on running, but then he came and chased me in the car. He was so upset that he'd missed me coming through, that he found me about 10 k's later on another fire trail.
Yeah. And Stephen's also really gotten involved with the community. Like he crewed for Isabel Ross, who we spoke to about her Barclay experience. So that must have been a terrific thing to do, Steve.
Oh, amazing experience to be able to be over there, and just see that part and that different side to running, and nice to actually be on the other side and actually supporting someone in their dreams to do a race. So that was definitely phenomenal to be over there doing that.
Yeah. One consistent highlight in his running that I saw on DUV is seems to be a Sri Chinmoy event somewhere just about every year that you've been running. And this year you chose the big one, the self-transcendence race.
Yes. So Sri Chinmoy, so I basically did my first Sri Chinmoy race back, it was probably just after my first year of running. It was one of their small races here in Sydney. And my wife actually crewed. She actually volunteered at that race. So they really love to get the community between the runners and just the local community just to try and help out. And they always have a wonderful, beautiful offer of, if anyone helps out, then anyone can actually then run a free race the next time. And helpers are allowed to pass them on to their runners if their partners are runners. So that was back in 2015, and then I moved on to, not long after that, doing my first 24-hour race with the Sri Chinmoy team here in Sydney, and basically really got to know the team back then. Prachar is the main race director of that whole marathon team, which are based out of Canberra, and we really got to know the whole group, which has grown so much in my last 7 years of running, that I actually consider them a real big part of my family, and really big mentors to me in basically shaping me to be who I am as a runner. As much as I like the competitive side of running, it also makes me realise that there's a lot more to running than just about getting out there and wanting to win or beat other people, but more about running for yourself and discovering who you want to be through your running. And that's what they taught me. So they've always been a part of it there, and I've always enjoyed doing their races. And if I'm not racing in their races, both my wife and I are often just there to help out and volunteer at their races as well.
Fantastic. I'm sure you'll do plenty of podcasts with people asking about your self-transcendence experience, who concentrate on the physical side of running. So we will perhaps touch on a little bit of that. But I'd really like to focus on the whole mindset and spiritual side. That's a really significant component of what we do at Mind Focused Running. And it's just so wonderful to be able to speak to you about that experience. Last year we spoke to Graham Cunningham, and that was a great session as well. So, yeah. I
was lucky enough, he was actually in New York. So most of the Sri Chinmoy group from around the world, they have a 2-week sort of celebratory meditation workshop, which goes for about 2 weeks, and it usually runs always just prior to the start of the 3100 race. Right. So there was a lot of people there from around the world. Graham Cunningham was actually there. So I was really, really privileged to be able to meet him before he flew back to Australia. And we had a really nice run the next day, the day after I arrived. Got to run around the course and just listen to him and his experiences. So, and for me, being someone very, very new to especially that side of the actual multi-sport or multi-day running and that length, it was really nice to actually hear his thoughts from both sides, as you said, a little bit from the physical side, but also from your own mind side of how to actually approach the race and how to be open in that race as well. And that was really nice, especially from him and quite a few of the other locals and the runners that were there, to give me that that view prior to starting. So it was quite a privilege.
Yeah. With mind-focused running, everybody goes through what we call the core sessions, and that's the sort of the first 13 weeks. And that sort of, for most people, that's their introduction to meditation and mindfulness and sort of mindset around running. But in the very first session, we talk about Sri Chinmoy, and I share the 3100 Run and Become movie, and it's almost mandatory viewing for everybody before they sort of start on their mind-focused running journey. So in terms of what the race is about, everybody here is pretty well across it. But just very quickly, it's a race run around a block in Queens, New York. What's the distance of the block? A couple of miles?
So the block, so it's a half-mile block, approximately 884 meters for the block.
Yeah, and then you run 3,100 miles, and you have 52 days to run that 3,100 miles in. Yeah.
So it is. So basically, it's two parts to the race. So you do have the race. They do set a distance of 3,100. 31 was a very special number to Sri Chinmoy, so that's where he managed to pick up the distance of 3,100 miles. And he, over his years, he had set the date. The time had changed. Originally, it used to be a 51-day race. So if I go right back to the start, the very initial race used to be 2,700 miles, which was a very important date or number for Sri Chinmoy. And then after that, he had increased it to 3,100, which was another special number to him. And so then, therefore, he left it, ended up staying at the 3,100 miles. Originally, it was 51 days. And then there was one of the famous women that ran it, Superbra. She's run it 13 times, and she was one of the original sort of disciples who Sri Chinmoy had invited to run the race. So for a number of years, the race date or time had actually used to be called the Superbra time. So he would then extend that days of the race to allow her to finish. So some years went all the way up to 60 days. So it was basically, for runners who weren't actually going to reach the mileage, they actually had extra days to be able to complete the race as long as she was still running, and that was it. Once she had done the race, which has now been running for 26 years, he finally did end up setting a time limit of 52 days. And this was more just to meet a bit of more of a world standard, and just to be able to keep it a race that was on the world stage, being a certified foot race. He had to set a time limit. So that ended up with the 52 days in the end. So it's like two parts to the race. So as much as there is the idea of trying to reach 3,100 miles, probably something that's even bigger in the race is the commitment to be able to do 52 days, regardless of whatever happens to each individual runner within that race. So that often would mean a lot more to Sri Chinmoy than actually people who would actually complete the 3,100 miles, because often the runners that may not reach that distance, and that's what I had got this year. So I never actually reached the distance. I finished with 2,728 miles because of quite a few issues that I had picked up along the way. And so for me, it was, in the end, it was about wanting to show my commitment to myself and to the actual race and the community that I wanted to reach that whole 52 days. And that's where my race really meant a lot to me and what I had to do to get through what I was getting through to be able to do that. So in the end, that meant a lot more to me. I didn't really mind not getting the distance. I knew what I had actually, what had happened to me through the race, that quite early on, that physically that was not going to happen for me. So it was all about focusing on then what I needed to do to be able to come back every day and manage what I had to manage to show that commitment. And it was really important to me to have that commitment and last all the way to the end, which was midnight on that last day, which I was able to do. So I ended up being finishing my last lap, came in at 1 minute before midnight on day 52.
Fantastic. Yeah, like you say, like that's a, yeah, I've never heard that, but they just make so much sense, you know. Yeah, and you know, the total of miles isn't important. It's about, you know, getting through the days. Yeah.
And it's quite so it's quite a lot to be able to focus through. So you end up focusing. So if I go back a little bit, so I had a lot of footy shoes. I was very new to the full-on, like, long multi-day sports. So I've had a good background, 24 hours, 48 hours. My qualifier for the race was a solo 6-day that I had done last year due to the fact that we're all locked down in pandemic and I couldn't actually get to an official race. And they do ask that you have a minimum of unofficial 6-day race, so they can use that as a gauge to make sure that you are capable physically of understanding what multi-day running is all about. So I had done one 6-day. I'd managed to do 650 Ks here at my local athletics track, and they were happy to accept that. But for me, I was probably the most inexperienced when it came to anything longer than that. So most of the other runners have had a bit of a history and their background was more multi-day. Most of them have done more 6 and 10-day races, and some have done a little bit longer. And quite about half the field have done quite a number of the 3,100 mile races. So their own experience was a lot more than mine. So out of that, I did end up with a lot of footy shoes, which on day 22 had come to a point where the race doctor had pulled me from the race due to how bad my feet were. I had to get approval from a podiatrist specialist to be happy that they would let me back in the race, which I was allowed to come back with a mandatory minimum 4 days recovery on the feet. So by the time I got to come back, I had lost 4 days of running. So in theory, I could have possibly still made the distance, but in reality, it would have meant that I would have had to have come back on day 26 and basically go straight back into running a full amount of minimum mileage and add another lot of, say, 10 miles on top of that for every day to the rest of the race. And knowing what my feet were like, I knew that was probably going to be theoretically not possible. So I quickly had to sort of get that out of my mind, that it wasn't about the mileage anymore. And for me, it was about wanting to be able to show my commitment to that race and to myself, and doing what I had to do to be able to come back every single day and be on that start line at 6 a.m. every morning, and being able to last each day and doing what I felt was right to allow me to come back the next day and the next day. And then that's what got me through to the end of the race. I did set little goals along the way, which I think you need to do to really give yourself a bit of focus. But those goals of a little bit of distance were just more milestones for me. But it was never set in stone. So I never really allowed myself to be committed too much to a certain distance. And all I really cared about was that I could make 52 days. for myself. It was for quite a bit, so I felt I owed it to myself. I especially felt like I owed it to my country, who was giving me so much support back at home. I owed it to the people who had come over to help crew for me over there and gave up their time. And then it was also for the whole community of Sri Chinmoy and the runners as well. So that was really important to me. And I was really proud that I was able to do that for the whole time and get to the end and achieve what I achieved. So that was massive.
So one thing that we talk about is so many people focus on meeting the cutoff in these big events, and we talk about letting go of even the idea of finishing within cutoff, because it doesn't matter, if it's a 40-hour cutoff in a 100-miler, what's the difference between 39 hours and 55 minutes or 40 hours and 10 minutes? There is absolutely no difference.
And that's exactly right. And there's not, and that was what I had done it for myself. If I had focused on the fact that I needed to reach a certain distance, I know in myself I would not have made it to the end of that race. So that's what I had to take out to be important, and I had to really focus on what was important for me, and that was my journey. So that's what kept me going. So trying to discover every day and learning something new every day, and that's what kept me positive and kept me focused and kept me wanting to come back every day and be a part of that race, which was really nice, because at no point I felt in the end for the whole 52 days did I ever want to quit, no matter how tough it got. And I had some really painful days with my feet, and I still never felt like that I was in a position where I didn't want to come back the next day or even finish the day that I was doing. But I did have a lot of days where I was made to stop early. The race doctor wouldn't let me run the full 18 hours on given days. And so she was setting up a lot of a plan, which changed week for week. And so there were days where I had to finish at 8 o'clock. And that was a little bit hard, watching the other runners keep running, trying to decide that, am I still showing full commitment? But I did realise in the end that I needed to do to be able to keep going. And if I didn't do that and felt like I had to run through to 11 o'clock each night with the other runners, then again, I wouldn't have been able to come back after a certain time. And it was, and that's where you realise that, that's not important anymore. One, you look after yourself, and two, find out what's really important. And again, it was doing the right thing every day and being happy with what I achieved on each given day, whether it was only 40 miles, which was 20 miles under the minimum, or some days I managed to get 65 or a little bit more miles. So I made the most of the days that were really good, and focused on the days that were really tough, and feel proud that that's what I could do on those days. And I knew that was going to allow me to come back the next day and do it again.
Fantastic. With the self-transcendence race, you don't sort of just log on to register now, pay a few $1,000s and you're in. What is the process in terms of running that race? Like, I know there's an application process, but what are the sorts of boxes that you need to tick to be considered?
Yeah, so it's definitely not as you mentioned, not just a standard. I like the look of that race. Log on and pay your money and you're in. It's a race that basically, if they feel you're the right person to be able to be a part of that race, you get given an invitation to come and be a part of it. So part of that invitation is generally, once you've been invited, you do have a spot. as long as you meet sort of their criteria and that they feel happy that you would be a good fit. You do get an application with that, but that application is basically just you've already been accepted in the race. So for myself, I'd been following that race probably for at least 5 to 6 years, and knowing 5 years ago that this was something I really wanted to do as part of my running journey and my discovering of myself. So I'd kept it to myself for about 3 years, and you sort of have to feel not so much that you can look at a race like this and go, oh, I can do this, but you have to know in your heart that, and spiritually, you have to know, is this a race that you want to do, and why do you want to do the race? And I'd sort of decided 2 years ago that I felt like I was really ready to do this race and to go on this journey. So I approached Prachar 2 years ago about the idea of what it would take for me to actually do this race in 2022, which for me is my 50th year. And it was something I wanted to do for me as being 50. So I actually had a lot of support from the Sri Chinmoy team here in Australia as sort of my sponsor and my support going forward to the team over in New York, who at the time didn't know who I was. To do a race like this, there's sort of two components. One, they have to see that you're capable of doing a multi-day style of running. So they often will look towards people who have had a history of 6 and 10 day and longer races, so 1,000 Ks, 1,000 miles. And then for them, the biggest part is they'd like to get to know you in some way to see if you would actually fit into the community over there. Because you're running with the same group of runners, and it's only a small group of approximately 7 to 12 runners, for 52 days, predominantly three quarters of a day, you're out there running around the course with everybody. You're also got the running community of Sri Chinmoy that are there to volunteer and help out. And they're there, again, all day, every day. So they need to feel that you fit in as part of the family. And they've had runners before who have come over and for whatever reason haven't quite fitted in and joined into the group. And as they said, it puts a bit of a black cloud over the actual race and the like the community there. They said, and that often will then spread out amongst the other runners, and that's something that they try really big to make sure that everyone fits in together as a family. So for myself, because they didn't know me personally, I had a lot of that support from Sri Chinmoy here with Prachar and the team. And I was lucky enough that having such a beautiful history with the team here and running through my whole running career with them, Prachar was over the moon to be able to be my support and sponsor and pass that on to the team over there, which if it wasn't for that, I would need a lot more before that they would have ever accepted me to come into that race.
That's fantastic background. Thanks, Stephen. Meditation is a really strong component of Sri Chinmoy. Do you meditate? Did you meditate before the event? How did you come into meditation if you did?
So I don't. For me, I don't do the traditional style of meditation, but I find I get a lot of that through my running. That's something I've discovered very early on in my running sort of career, which is only approximately about 8 years old. So I haven't been running for too long. But one thing that really made me want to take up running was discovering myself and who I am and who I wanted to be, which I've done that actually through a lot of my runs. And I tend to find, I run probably 95% of my time. I run on my own, and that can be either an hour run or that can be, I could be out doing an 18-hour midweek long run, and that I really enjoy. So I tend to find that I will meditate a lot through my running and use my running to do my meditation. Often that's why I love going out on the trails. Often I love just going out by myself, and I don't really seek to run with a lot of other people. When I do get that, that's really nice and really enjoyable, but it's not something I seek to get my enjoyment in myself and my running. So that for me is my form of meditation. And I tend to find I discover a lot about myself, and I think it's actually made me such a better person to what I was 8 to 10 years ago before I started running. And I put a lot of that attributes down to running has really calmed me down and made me realize that there's a lot more in life than getting too worked up over a lot of things, and that you can see things a lot more calmer. And yeah, so I put that a lot down to my running.
So you get to New York. Tell us about connecting with the Sri Chinmoy team when you got there, the other runners, the lead up to the event.
Really beautiful. So I got there 4 days before the race. I was lucky enough that Prachar and a few of the Australian team were still there after their 2-week workshop. So I'd literally only arrived in the country. I was there only 1 hour, and we'd already had organised to have a beautiful dinner at their local restaurant, the Anna Brahma restaurant. And I got to meet half the runners in the race there, which was fantastic because it was my first time meeting all of them. And also got to meet the race directors and a lot of the Sri Chinmoy community who work and volunteer and all live in the area. So a lot of them already knew me. They already knew who I was coming over. For me, it was really nice to meet all of them for the first time and get that connection between all the people that were going to be there to support us and help us through the whole 52 days, and get to see other runners that you're actually going to be with, and just really get to know who they were, and just get that connection with them, which was really nice. So I think over the 4 days, I pretty much must have met 3/4 of most of the community that live there and were going to be part of that race prior to the start of the race, which was fantastic.
Terrific. So Penny came across and crewed, yeah?
No, Penny. So Penny was going to come across for a small amount of time, as it was, and it wasn't really relayed to me until sort of I was actually there starting the race. So Penny kept putting off coming, like booking to come over. So she was going to come over during the school holidays, which would have been about halfway through the race. Now, just a bit of background, my wife and I, we're a really good team, with Penny always supporting me through all my runs. She's crewed at so many of my runs, especially my 6-day I did, my 24 hours, my 48 hours. And we've got to a point where she just knows what to do. I don't even really need to give her any instructions anymore or how to do everything. One thing that I discovered that Prachar really wanted me to do was he really encouraged Penny not to come over for this race. And that was more on the idea that he knew how much I can rely on Penny to help me through, say, ups and downs and through maybe some hard times. And he wanted me to be able to be there and learn and discover my journey on my own, but without my partner's support. So he understood that I definitely needed helpers over there and support. That was definitely a given, but it was a different style of support. And he knew that I would have had to have done this journey and gone through it on my own. And that was something he really wanted me to do. And I think in the end, I was a little bit taken back at first, going, I didn't realise that they had sort of made that sort of decision. But I could actually see where Prachar was coming from with regards to that. And I'm really actually thankful. And I think I learned a lot more and discovered a lot more about myself knowing that Penny wasn't there, but back at home supporting me. So we were lucky enough, pretty much almost every morning I would give her a call at 6:30, about half an hour after we started running each day, and I would talk to her for about 15 minutes. And that was a beautiful way for me to start the day. And then once the phone call ended, as we always said, off I go and go run my journey each day. So, I think I did a lot better, and I look back on it, and it was definitely the right thing for me to do, to go over there and discover this for myself. So, so Penny didn't come over, but I did have helpers for the whole time in 3 lots. I had a running friend here, Colin, who came over for the first 2 weeks, and which was really good because I knew being on my own, and I could see trying to set myself up and trying to get an idea of what was required every day. That would have been so hard to do on my own. And then after 2 weeks, I was really lucky to have a female runner, Fiona Hayvice from New Zealand. She had run in my 48-hour race this year and had showed interest of wanting to come over and help support me and actually get more of an idea and a feel for the Sri Chinmoy community and the race over there. And Fiona and I, very, very similar in our styles of running. So the way she crewed for me was phenomenal, and I didn't even have to think. So basically, she just crewed perfectly and knew what I needed. If I needed something and I could ask, it was done so easily for her. And the best part, having her in the middle session, was when I had my really dark time where I was pulled from the race for 4 days. And she really helped me stay focused and kept me positive through those days, and showed me the reason why I wanted to come back and keep running after they allowed me to come back on course. And then after she left for the last 3 weeks, I actually had my parents come over for the last 3 weeks to help crew. That was a bit interesting. My parents have never crewed for me, so they were very, very new with regards to what ultra running was really about, what an ultra runner actually may need or require, especially for someone who's running 16, 17 hours a day, and then that's every single day. So that was a really good learning curve for them, and a bit of a learning curve for both of us, as a bit of a relationship as well. So a lot of give and take there, and we had a little bit of ups and downs here and there, which I think you'll often do with family, but learn how to work through them. And it was amazing and lovely to see that how much they embraced it, and my dad really taking that role on, and even getting such beautiful praise from the local community over there and all the helpers at the race as to how much he had grown as a person who knew. They could see he didn't know anything about what an ultra runner was, or what ultra running was all about. And by halfway through his 3 weeks, he was like a veteran at it. So, that was quite proud to actually watch him take that on and do that. So, and that's who I had for the last 3 weeks. And then they were lucky enough to be there to see us right to the end, and see us finish as well.
Yeah, no, that would have been an amazing experience. Yeah, straight after this session, I'm actually doing a course session on crewing, and we talk about that very thing. Getting family to crew for you, and the upsides and the downsides that can present. So, yeah, no.
Oh, look, definitely. So the 3 weeks or 2.5 weeks I had with Fiona, we didn't have one little hiccup. But I think I was very lucky that her style of running is very, very similar to my style. So I think that just worked really, really well. And I think I was very lucky to have that, and a bit spoilt, I suppose, for those 2 weeks. But that was really nice. But definitely when, like, with my family being over there, my mum and dad, it teaches both of us actually, and it taught me a lot too, on having to be a bit more open, a bit more flexible as well. And even though I may be running for that length of time every day, and you're not always in the right frame of mind to be flexible, it shows that sometimes you just need to be. And they taught me a little bit of that towards the end. And the biggest thing with all of this, and it was one thing that we said right at the start, that at the end of the day, no matter what happens, especially at a race, we all understand that that is part of racing, and that's not part of your personal relationship. So whatever happens there always stays with the race, and it never gets taken back home. So that's a really good learning curve. Often I've seen people have bad times with the wrong crew or family crewing, and it can sometimes be taken away from the track or away from whatever race they're doing. So it's a really big thing to understand that it's not the proper relationship. It's just something that happens there, and it always ends up staying there. So once the race is finished, we all let it just go, and we all just sit back and really enjoy what was achieved, and celebrating that. So definitely a good learning curve for that one.
Yeah. I was talking to somebody last week, and they ran the Adelaide 6-day, and she said to me, "You know what, Rob? Just about everybody who goes and runs a 6-day thinks that they can run 100 kilometres a day and multiply it by 6, and they end up at 600 kilometres. But when you look at it, very few actually achieve that, right?" And I think, and at the time, it just made me again realise the enormity of the self-transcendence race. Like not doing 100 kilometres a day for 6 days, which is difficult, but to do it for 52 days. How did you handle that in your mind before going into the race?
So before going into the race, I was actually really good. I never let the enormity of the race consume me at all when I was here at home before I left. So I knew what I was doing, and I don't think I ever really looked at it in the sense that I'm going to go run 3,100 miles or I'm going to go run for 52 days. So I always just looked at it as I'm heading over to do a journey for myself. So I never really saw it as a race, and so then therefore it never really I never really got anxious. I never really got nervous for it. So I just basically focused on the consistency here. I changed my training. I didn't do anything major change in it. But it was more about just the consistency of wanting to run every day. So I had actually done a training session of running 52 days straight, which actually finished the day before I flew out to New York. But I didn't run those 52 days where I'm doing massive distances. So I'd just be my normal training. So I may do only a 10K one day or a 5. While I was still a few weeks out, I'd still have maybe a 50K long run during the week, but never changed up what I was normally doing. Still only ran my 100 to 120 Ks a week, which is my normal training. But I just wanted to have the consistency of doing the whole time, and that's sort of what I focused on. Never really focused too much on the enormity of the race. And I think if you did, it would consume you so much. I think by the time you got there, you'd be a basket case. So even when I got over there, I was still really good. I think the only time I was nervous was the night before, and probably standing on that start line on that very first morning. I think that was when it really first hit me that I'm about to embark on quite a major journey. But you let that disappears really quickly. So the biggest part of this race, and I think if you approach it the right way, and don't approach it as in, I want to run 3,100 miles, let's see what I can do. If you're approaching in the sense that you're there to do a journey of 52 individual days, and you focus on those individual days. So basically for me, every now and then your mind might wander to further ahead. Now that may be a week ahead, and I'm going to go into week 2. It may be every now and then you may just sort of jump forward to the end of the race, but you realise very quickly, you take that out of your head. You stop that thought quite quickly, because as soon as you look at that, then everything in between just seems insurmountable. So the way I did it, and you can see a lot of the runners do it, is you have a quick think about the fact that you're going to run for 52 days. Then you're bringing it back to, all right, I'm running for a week, and there's 7 weeks in the race. The week that you're in, you forget about the weeks that are ahead, and quite often you forget about the weeks that were already behind you. Within that week, you would break it down to basically individual days. So for me, it was about the one rule that they really liked is no matter what you do, you're expected to be on that start line at 6 a.m. every morning for the minute silence and for the start. It's actually written in their rules when they send you the application. You're allowed to run till midnight, but there's no hard and fast rule as to when you finish in the evening. You just try and they just need you to try and reach the minimum amount of mileage or kilometres every day. Now, sometimes you could reach that at 10 o'clock. Some runners are reaching that at 5 minutes to midnight, but there was no rule to say that you had to run to a certain point. You just couldn't run past midnight. That's when the course shuts. So you go get some sleep, and then the race organisers also get to have a rest as well. So for us, or for myself, the big part was the commitment of knowing that I wanted to be there at 6 a.m. every morning. The 4 mornings that I wasn't allowed to run, to keep me focused and to show in myself that this is what I wanted to do, I still set my alarm for 5 a.m. for all those 4 mornings. I got up with Fiona. I put on all my running gear. I would ride the push bike down to the track to the start line, and I would stand on that start line all those 4 mornings with all the other runners and do my minute silence. And then they would start the race, and I just wouldn't run for the 4 days. So at no time in the whole 52 days did I actually miss one of the actual 6 a.m. starts, which was a really big thing for me. And basically your days running for me was all about just going, I'm starting at 6 and I need to get through to about 60 miles in the day. This will take me through to the evening. Once you get to the evening, your day will end and you'll end up back. You'll have your beautiful shower and you start having your rest. As soon as you're actually finished for the day, it's amazing that that day's already gone. It's such a routine that you do. You don't have to think about what you've already done, and you don't really have to think about what's still to come. Then you'd finish at the accommodation, go to sleep, and sleep was actually quite good. It was amazing how much of you got into a routine, and you do actually end up having a good night's sleep, even though it's only 4.5, 5 hours maximum.
Grant told me that he had nightmares about running.
I actually was pretty good. I actually found that it was actually really, really relaxing. So it's very much a routine, and most of the runners did the same. You just don't change that routine at all. So for myself, you'd finish at the end of the evening. I'd have a recovery drink there. Whoever was my help at the time would have everything packed up, ready to go. So you'd be literally leaving the race course within 5 minutes of finishing your run. Because I was given a push bike to get to and from the course for the whole 52 days instead of getting lifts. So that was my bit of my cool down. So I'd hop on the push bike, I'd ride back to my accommodation, which was only about 5 minutes ride away, but that was a really nice cool down. And it just sort of brought yourself and your mind back to back to reality a little bit. I'd get to the accommodation, and even though some nights, because I had a lot of foot care to do, even though some nights still might have been over an hour and 20 to get to bed, but you'd literally get there, you'd basically have your shower first, you would soak your feet in your foot bath, you'd have something to eat while you're doing that, you do your foot care, you get everything ready for the next morning, and then you go to bed. And that was the same routine every night. The alarm went off at 5 a.m. every single morning. And then you did your morning, exactly the same routine. And then that routine would finish with hopping on the bike at about 10 to 6, riding down to the course, getting to the course, putting your shoes on and standing on the start line. So that's basically how I looked at it on an individual day. Within that individual day, it's amazing that you still broke your day down. So my day was then broken down into four-hour sessions. So I would have 3 breaks in a day, about 10 a.m., 2:30, and about 7. And those 3 breaks would entail 10-minute sleep at each break. And that was more just to give your legs and your feet a small bit of recovery. And it's amazing what 10 minutes sleep can actually do. So then you'd look at running within a 4-hour block. Now, within that 4-hour block, you could even break it down to, you'd roughly do about 30 laps in a 4-hour block. So then you're breaking it down into 10 lap lots, and then those 10 lap lots will then get broken down into single lap runs. And then in that single lap, you would then break your course down into 4 or 5 parts of the actual half-mile block. So it's amazing that it comes down to such a small amount that you focus on. You don't need to look at the 52 days, and it doesn't actually come into the realm in your head at all. So, and because of all of that, you don't ever think, I've still got 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 weeks to run. And you don't even really look at, I've been running for 2, 3, 4, or 5 weeks. So I think the more you can do that, the more you focus on what's actually in front of you, and that's where you're putting your mind to it. That's how it's possible to do a race like this. And within that, you can then see what you need to achieve for each individual day. And if you look in the sense that, and I did that with my 6 day, I try to break it down that I have to do that amount every day. And it does make it hard in a 6 day, especially when you have a 24-hour 6 day, like for every day. You then really have to focus on where you're going to achieve that mileage. And that's where a lot of people fall short a bit. So they get more carried away with the sense that while they feel good at the start of a 6 day, they do massive miles, but they don't realize that will always catch up with you towards the end of any multi-day style running. And you have to be very focused on knowing that whether it's 1 to 6 days or 1 to 52 days, that there's no point doing anything too major on one day, because no matter what you do, it will always affect you down the track. And if you can keep it consistent, then you can keep that consistency going for the whole time, be it 52 days. For the winner, for Andre, it was 43 days. So his consistency was he knew what he needed to do in a day to achieve it in 43. For some of us who knew that we weren't going to achieve the mileage, it was about trying to be consistent to allow us to come back and do the whole 52 days. And I think in your body, that 52 days was just what was set by us. So your mind knows that that's where you're setting yourself for all your days. You could technically just keep going. If it was a 60-day, 70-day run, I believe that you could run that as long as it needs to be, or as long as you want to, if you're looking at that sort of focus. But it was really amazing that at the end of that 52 days, waking up the next day, your body and your mind finally told you it was the end, and you actually felt different. So something my body hadn't, and I'm still feeling it now, for that whole 52 days, I never felt fatigue in my body. I never felt fatigued in my legs. I could get up every morning and I felt like my legs were as strong as what they were on day one. But once I think my mind knew that it was done, it was amazing how much that came back into your entity. So like now, I feel more fatigued now than what I was doing when I was actually running that amount of distance every single day. So it's amazing how you can focus yourself and concentrate on something and have it work. And it's amazing how much, once that's done, how much your mind tells you that it's finished now.
Yeah, No, thank you so much for explaining that process, and it's perfect. From our team, we've got 6 or 7 people running Delirious 200 mile in a couple of months, and it's exactly the same thing. You can't go all out on those first couple of days and bank miles.
No.
I always say, whatever you give up at the front, you'll make back at the end. And
and whatever you do extra at the front, it will take that off you at the end. So it's that really focusing on that perfect fine line between understanding what you need to do at the start to allow you to be able to continue that at the end. So it's basically can be a double edge. So you take your time at the start and you can make that back up at the end, but you think you're going to do really well at the start and go a lot harder, it will make that up. It will take that away from you at the end. So it can have a complete opposite effect. So, and that's exactly right. Something like the Delirious Rest, that could be technically for runners. That's a 5-day, multi-day race. And it's no different to like doing a 6-day race. You aren't told that you have to stop at midnight and you can start running at 6. So it is up to you to decide where you need to focus on running and rest times, and being able to trust yourself with those rest times early. They will certainly pay dividends towards the end. And you may not finish, as Rob has mentioned, you may not finish in the quickest time, but that's a time that's perfect for you. But what I find more important is you finish strongly. It doesn't matter what that time is, but it's knowing that you can cross that finish line. And if you feel strong with what you've achieved, that's where you win, and that's where you've actually gained something. So, and that's how I see it. And you want to do that. You want to be able to finish strong within yourself. Now, whether you're the first person to cross that line or the last, if you finish last and you feel just as strong, well, then you're just as much a winner as the person who managed to do it and cross the line first.
Fantastic. Look, I got a bit carried away with my questions, but I'm going to open it up to the crew now. So who's got a question for Stephen?
Hi, Stephen. Oh, you're amazing. Thank you for speaking to us.
Oh, you're welcome.
I just wanted to ask, how do you fuel or what do you use?
Oh, for the race? Oh, that's
to fuel. Oh, that's a whole nother hour, I know.
Oh, it is. I was going to say, that is a really good question. So I'll put it really simply.
Cool.
The 3,100 mile race is a race of eating and running. It's literally you eat just as much as what you run in a given day.
Cool.
So no, the race is really good. So the fueling for this race is not like a normal race. So it is about, so we go through approximately 6,000 to 8,000 calories per given day over each of the 52 days. So it's a really big part of the Sri Chinmoy or the organisers to keep us fueled. Now, they actually supply us with food all day long from literally 6 a.m. right through to when sort of the last meals that they provide us is around about 9:30 at night. So it's you're not doing your normal race nutrition. So you can't do a race like this on gels and bars or even fluid nutrition. So they basically have all day long, they have a table with snacks on it, and they have a table with water and electrolytes. So predominantly the electrolyte that they used was Tailwind, which was really good. I generally run a lot of my races here purely on Tailwind, but as a smaller race. So I had a fair bit of Tailwind, but I just donated to the race organisers because it was easy just to use it off their table than to do it myself.
Yeah.
And that's just basically your in-between stuff. So your main nutrition is to get a good balanced amount of that nutrition in you through real foods. And it's the real foods that is what sustains and keeps you going. So predominantly a day would be roughly, we would start the day at 6 a.m. I actually had made a smoothie every morning before I started back at my accommodation. Now, that smoothie entailed having oat milk, bananas, another fruit, so it was either strawberries or blueberries. I would have 2 massive scoops of coconut oil within that smoothie. I would also have a big dollop of honey, and I would put in my 2 scoops of protein as well. And that was basically my start, which was a really good way just to keep me going. So then once we got there, fats are a really big part of this race. And so yogurt is huge in the morning. So everyone tends to have yogurt. They supply yogurt. For me, I was completely dairy free, so I had to supply my own. It was so I had to find other means, whether it be oat yogurt, coconut yogurt. So we'd start with that. Usually about an hour into the race, they would then their first supply would be a massive bowl of oatmeal. So we would start with oatmeal at about 7 in the morning. Then by 8:30, breakfast arrives. That ranges from everything from steamed vegetables like broccoli and cauliflower for breakfast, through to always had eggs every morning for breakfast. So whether it be fried eggs, boiled eggs, deviled eggs, scrambled eggs. Within the eggs, you would have mixed in spinach. You could have mushrooms in there. So they'd always mix other stuff in with it. Often we could have pasta for breakfast, quinoa for breakfast, couscous. So, and that was a massive bowl of that. And then that was about 8:30. Then by 9:30, you'd get morning tea. So morning tea would comprise of either a burger or a massive sandwich. It would be a big bowl of soup and then normally a fruit smoothie. Then by 12 o'clock, you'd have lunch. So lunch would be another massive meal like breakfast. And that could be anywhere from Chinese to Indian to couscous to pasta to rice to dal. And also with that, you would get probably another soup as well. 2:30 would be your next meal. That would be your afternoon meal of either another soup. We would have our vegetable smoothie every afternoon at 2:30. So that was like kale, all your greens all blended up with one sort of sweet thing. So it'd either be an apple or a banana in there just to make it palatable. Then we would have dinner come through between 5:30 and 6 p.m. Again, another massive meal like lunch, pasta, Chinese, Indian, dal, rice, more steamed vegetables. So we would have cauliflower and broccoli probably 3 times a day, every day. So had enough of that after the 52 days. Then evening, we would have their evening snack, which would be about 9:30. Now, that would normally be, that could be tacos, that could be another sandwich, it could be some dessert. So that would come about 9:30. Now, in amongst all of this, you would still also get people who would donate food to the track as well. So a lot of the community would come down and they may bring throughout the day things like burritos, pizzas, more tacos. Some people might bring some small other little meals of Chinese, like the Taiwanese community. And then you get your sweets would come down. So then you'd get pastries, donuts. So it was basically, I think you almost ate as much as what you ran every single day through that race. But it was something that you needed to do. So you really learnt to do everything against what you've always taught. Is you can actually eat a 3-course meal and just keep running and actually process that while you're actually running. So you learn how to be able to do that and not have that affect you at all. So at no point did I feel like I had stomach issues or gut issues trying to process the food. I would also finish, and so the biggest part is, and I think the best part of your recovery is you've got to have enough fuel in your body to allow you to rest and sleep overnight. And that's the biggest part of what actually repairs and recovers your muscles ready for the next day. So one thing I always made sure was I never went to bed feeling hungry or not having something in me. So I would always finish my day with a recovery drink, which is my Tailwind. And that's a really big part of putting something in you. And because your body's not trying to fight to get energy from running 100 Ks each day, it's therefore not taking away that time and that nutrition from repairing your muscles. So I would also often have like 2-minute noodles. So I'd have a bowl of 2-minute noodles, or if we had leftover food, we'd warm it up back at the accommodation. And I would eat that probably 11:30, even midnight. And that would be the last thing I'd have with a probably an electrolyte drink. And then I'd go to bed with that. And not one of the 52 days did I ever wake up feeling like I was suffering or I was hungry or I was trying to search for energy, which I've had in the past. I've done races here, 100 milers or 100K races. I've done really hard, gone to bed, but because I haven't fueled properly, I've woken up really suffering in the middle of the night. And that's all it is your body has burnt all your nutrition off. So then it starts to actually drag it away from your muscles. And that's why you wake up in the morning with really sore, stiff muscles. And for this race, never did. So you'd wake up every morning and everything was good and free. And actually, I had to go down probably 20 flights of stairs from my accommodation to the road, and then still ride a push bike to the start. And I never had an issue doing that. So it's amazing what fueling that is such a massive and important part to running.
Could you do that before doing this event, like in terms of eating meals, real foods during an event, or is it something that you picked up while you were there?
No, I was really good. I was really big at my that 52-day training session I did. That was a big part of that training session for me. Was I never set the runs on all those 52 days at any set time. So I would run anywhere from morning, midday, or evening. And I really made myself allow me to do that I wouldn't go run and then have something to eat. Now, I could have lunch and then decide straight after lunch, I'd go have my training run for that day. So I actually was teaching myself for the 52 days to really get used to having a meal and running or not having a meal and running. So I never sort of allowed it to be one or the other. And it was, I must admit, probably over those 52 days at home, I really got used to being able to process having food in me and then just going out for my normal training run. So I think that was a really big part of allowing me to have that flexibility to be able to do that going into the race.
Brilliant advice. Who else has got a question?
Stephen.
Hi, John.
Hi. Could you talk through, how did your routine change during the bad weather that went through during the race? Did it change at all, or?
It did. The bad weather was really hard. I know, like in normal racing, so you might have a race that it rains all day. The nice thing with that is you can just run through that, and because you know that when you finally finish that race, be it either the evening or if it takes you through to the next morning, that's it. You stop, you go home, you have your shower, and you know that's the last you have to do with it. For us, so we had 5 days straight of rain in the middle of the race, and that was really hard to manage. So more because you're running through that rain all day one day, and when you're told that the weather forecast is going to be rain for the next 2, 3, and 4 days, you're just basically trying to manage it on one given day, but knowing that you're going to have to come back. And for myself, because of my bad feet, the rain did not help them at all. So the more that it rained on my feet, the softer my skin got on the bad parts of my feet, and the harder it made them recover. And I had to be very, very careful that I didn't re-damage the feet. And the softer my skin got, the more nerve pain I was getting up through my feet, which made it really hard. So yeah, basically what you want to do is you want to try and keep yourself as dry as possible. So for everything other than the feet, it was, you would try on a raincoat, you take your raincoat off, it may be too hot, you try a poncho on, you take it off. If I found that it was a walking day for me, because I wasn't able to run because of my bad feet, that was quite easy because we'd just use an umbrella. So there's a few shots of me heading around that circuit with an umbrella. So that was a new first, knowing how to run 100 Ks with an umbrella above your head, which was quite amusing a little bit. But that was really good because it kept my feet dry as much as possible. If you feel like I was in a good space to run, it was a matter of where you could, changing your shoes. I would do 4 shoe changes in a day. I may do 6 to 8 sock changes in a day. And it's the more dry you could keep your feet, the better they're going to be, the longer they will last. So, and it's the longer they sit wet, especially with socks on, the more that you will then suffer that the next day or the day after. So something like Delirious West for 5 days, if you have a feeling it's going to be a wet day, or if you're always good to have a good few changes of shoes, especially if you've got a good crew. I believe I think this year's race was a very wet race. So not having to run in those wet shoes, even if you got your wet shoes, but changing to dry socks, it's amazing just even how much that makes a big difference. And one thing I really did learn is cornstarch, so not corn flour, but just plain cornstarch, is an amazing thing to actually dry your feet out. So that was one thing I did every single time I had my rest and I would swap into dry socks, is you would dry your feet and then you basically cover them with a very light coating of cornstarch. And it is really, really fine. It doesn't congeal when it gets wet because most of it just powders away. But what it does is it leaves a beautiful dry feeling on your skin. And then you put your socks on, and it's doing that multiple times in a day was enough to keep your feet from ever going white or swelling up. So that was something I really learned, and a lot of the runners actually did that. So better than, I find cornstarch was really good, and I learned, so better than a lot of things like the 2 Toms feet powder or Johnson & Johnson's baby powder, because all of them have other products in them. Whereas cornstarch is just pure natural and there's nothing else in it but just plain powdered down cornstarch. So it doesn't create any other issues within your feet that I found that the other stuff can do. So that's basically what we had to do. Sometimes we ended up running out of, I ran out of dry raincoats. So you just had to try and manage as much as you can. But the rain that was probably one of the hardest. And even all the runners said that. They ended up turning around telling us that this was their wettest race that they had in the whole 26-year history of that run, with regards to the rain just coming each day. In the past, when they used to have this race in the summer, they would get heavier rainfall, but it may only be for 2 to 3 hours, and then that's it, and then it'd go. So then all runners could then change into dry gear, and they're right for the rest of the day. For us, because it just rained on and off for 16 hours a day, 5 days in a row, you just couldn't get away from it. So it was just a matter of having enough changes to be able to just stay as dry as you possibly could, but which didn't always work. So so rain's one of the hardest to deal with, but you can deal with it, and you can look after your feet and everything as well. So
fantastic, guys. I'm cognizant that it's 11:20 in Sydney, and we could go on for hours, I think. But I'll finish it off. I've got one last one for you. Well, sort of a double banger.
Yep.
What have you taken away from the event? And secondly, will you do it again?
So the biggest thing I've taken away from the event, that to me, is if you put your mind to it, absolutely anything is possible. I know with what I had to deal with through this race, on any other race, I would never. I've never completed the race. I would have looked at that, not having done this race and realizing what it can teach you. That I would have just said, "There's no way I could handle this pain and the amount of time that I was having to deal with it." But one thing this race has taught me is everything you can focus through, you can turn everything into a positive, and no matter what you put your mind to, everything is you can do whatever you want. You've just got to believe in yourself, and you can do it. And for the second question of will I go back, I do actually already have an invite to come back. So that's an open invitation now, and I would love to go back. They're all expecting me back next year, but for myself, I'd like to go back in 2 years' time to redo the journey and hopefully complete the other part of what this race is all about. The reason for 2 years for me is at the end of the day, I don't want to go back just to say I need to do the distance. I still want to go back because I want my heart to tell me it's the right time to go back. So, and I feel in myself that 2 years will be really nice to refocus on getting back to that journey and going back and doing that race again. So if all goes well, hopefully 2024, I'd like to be back there over in New York.
Terrific. Look, thanks so much for your time, Stephen. It's been wonderful. You've absolutely broken the record in terms of the amount of time that we've spent on this session with
Lovely.
with all of our guests. And again, just congratulations on that amazing experience that you're able to have. And like I totally look at the Sri Chinmoy's self-transcendence races, the Everest of ultra running. And that race is what attracted me to the whole mindfulness meditation side of things and my own spiritual journey. And I think it's probably done that for a number of people. So yeah, no, thank you so much.
You're welcome. And I've been watching your journey. So I remember you starting your mind focus running group, and I could see that's where it came from, which I thought was always beautiful to see you starting that up and looking at it from a different perspective to every other coaching group that's out there. And I agree with you 100% that for Sri Chinmoy, even though they call the 3100 mile their self-transcendence race, to me, all their races, for whatever reason, be it their 10K small race through to their 24-hour and 48-hour, up to the bigger ones overseas, to me, they all have self-transcendence. People seem to feel that you have to do their biggest to achieve that. You can achieve that in just doing the 24-hour race, because it is about how you approach it and the reasons why you want to do it. And I got a lot of that from doing their 24-hour races over the last 6 years, and they were always a race that I really enjoyed going back to because it made me want to do them for the right reasons. And even though I did get a good distance, it wasn't always about the distance there. And even in their 24-hour races, I'd still had bad ones. And as they taught me, it was about pushing through those bad ones. And they're just as good as the good ones. So I agree with you, Rob, with that. It's, yeah, to me, all their races are all about the idea of self-transcendence and running for yourself, as opposed to just a normal race.
Yeah, terrific. Okay. Thanks again, Stephen.
All right. Thank you very much, Rob. Really nice to meet everybody.
Thanks.